Live
Yeah,
now, we're
sure.
just starting recording. Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another edition of the Anthony Peake Consciousness Hour. One of the things I'm always consciously aware of is the way I say exactly the same things at every time when we start this program. But I suppose it means that we have continuity and consistency. And of course, if I went off and started saying peculiar other things, you guys would all get very disturbed and worried as to whether I was losing my sanity. Also, my apologies for my sniffiness. I'm coming down, I'm just getting over a cold at the moment. But it will make me sound huskier and maybe more interesting than I normally do. Who knows? Right, today is a program I've been really looking forward to, as I look forward to all the programs. But today we're joined by a gentleman called Professor Bob Davis. And Bob and I have been in contact now for probably around about at least 5 or 6 years. And we've been on occasional times where we've had long chats on Skype. And he and I share a very, very similar worldview in so many areas. And it is so important that academics like Bob are working with us in terms of moving forward the mysteries of consciousness and trying to understand exactly what consciousness is, what is the truth behind UFO encounters, what is behind near-death experiences. And these are all areas that Dr. Davis has been involved in for many, many years. And in fact, we'll be discussing in the program today his major project at the moment, which is a major documentary that he's working on, which involves certain people that have been guests on this program in the past, such as Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell. So let you know a little bit about Dr. Davis. He's been interviewed by dozens of radio programs and podcasts worldwide. His 30 plus national and international lectures have included presentations at Harvard, Cambridge University and Beijing University. Dr. Davis' research efforts, lectures and interviews vary across many disciplines with a focus on consciousness, the brain, parapsychology and inexplicable extraordinary experiences reported by millions worldwide. Given this foundation, a case is made for the subjective dimension of life or consciousness to be integrated as a co-partner with the physical universe into an overarching science. This is critical since it represents a movement away from destructive personality characteristics and the attainment of values that promote individual and collective survival. What a statement. Bob, welcome very much to the Anthony Peake Consciousness Hour.
Anthony, it's an absolute pleasure to be both with you and Sarah. It's an honor and certainly a big fan of your work.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Well, it's mutual because I've been a fan of your work for a long time and your writings and everything else as well. And it is so important, this, isn't it? In terms of breaking through to the general public. My concern is in many cases at the moment is there's an awful lot of charlatans out there. There's an awful lot of sky pilots out there, and they discredit the work we do. And this is the point of this program, is to get across the ideas that, this is a rigorous academic worldview that we're working on here and moving people away from the charlatans into the science, trying to understand this. And of course, one of the major things that's involved here is your documentary on consciousness. So can you tell us a little bit about, a lot about your motivation for doing the documentary and telling us a little bit about it?
Well, upon retiring, I began writing books on the UFO phenomenon, life after death, and my more recent book, Unseen Forces, the Integration of Science, Reality, and You, because I couldn't put down that left brain mindset I had, and I just have to do that. So I learned a great deal about many of these issues, and in my last book, Unseen Forces, while I was writing it, I said, this is going to make a great documentary. I just felt it all along the way. It's something that should be like with your books. They would make great documentaries as well because we speak the same language. How better than to get your message across, to say what you want to say before you leave this container of ours, to help wake up the world to the complexity of reality and life. It could only do it with a PBS documentary rather than a book, which is an advantage, of course. But I wanted to reach millions. I think we all have something very important to say, and it's critical to elevate the awareness of people and help shift that paradigm because Newtonian physics doesn't address what we're talking about, which is real. It's valid, and we're seeing now science starting to support what we call the paranormal will eventually be called quantum mechanics in a sense. Well, because that helps to explain much of this. How do you put science to the subjective experience that millions of individuals are having worldwide in so many different ways, which we can call a peak experience, if you wish. So trying to integrate that into information into a coherent whole is a very major challenge. And when you're very left-brained, you struggle with it because you can't apply the scientific method to it. But nevertheless, going to experts like yourself and others who we already have in the documentary will help bridge the gap, shift that needle just a bit in the right direction. Um,
Just very
to
quickly coming in here
yeah,
on this, Bob, because
please.
your background is quite unique in terms of this, isn't it? Your academic, your rigorous academic background. Can you just fill in us a little bit about this, and we'll come back to the documentary.
Sure. I received a PhD from the Ohio State University in the sensory neurosciences, which involved a lot of electrophysiological studies, experimental psychology, communication sciences, then some. So I was just always doing research. And you're stuck in the lab, getting grants, being supported by NIOSH, OSHA, etc. And and then you retire, and I just can't play bocce ball, and you know, and live a normal existence. I'm a little bit neurotic in that fashion. I got to study. I have to search for answers, and I have to try to seek truth in my own way. Not that I have the answers, by no means. I don't think any of us have any clear answers. That's why we need that paradigm shift, so to speak. But and that's the struggle, because I was always using a scientific method to formulate hypothesis, to prove or disprove. And now I have hypotheses and I don't know what to do. You can't put that strict scientific method to it. It doesn't apply in Newtonian physics. It's a critical, we needed it, but it doesn't get at these issues at hand. Quantum mechanics certainly does, as it integrates with Newtonian principles. So we're still on that cusp. The work you do, certainly the documentary, and the work of certainly many others are helping to make people more aware that this 3D reality of ours, as critical as it is, since we evolved out of this primordial soup, in which we're great at in terms of deciphering our 3D world, I'm coming to the realization there's certainly far more than that. And the brain, in fact, can be limiting or impeding our ability to see a much more complex reality that extends beyond 3D. And that's what we hear when people talk about their peak experiences, unique, extraordinary experiences, which come in so many different ways: out of body, near death, lucid dreams, even UAP interactions, among many other things. You can't ignore that. These are well-balanced people who have transpersonal experiences resulting from it and don't know who to turn to, because their world is rocked by these kinds of interactions, experiences that they have, that where logic doesn't apply. And we need to support these individuals. We can't forget the experiences themselves, who are more than blown away. You know, when their cork comes out of the bottle, they don't know who to turn to for answers. And when you go to the medical community, the answers you get are in the form of pills, which just does not help in any way, shape, or form. But you get a sense of a greater reality, and it's more real than real to these individuals. So I've had a few experiences that.
That's an interesting point here as to how, a sort of rigid, scientifically trained physicist and neurologist becomes interested in this work. So presumably, was it through your own experiences or the experiences you heard from other people? What stimulated all this? What made Bob Davis the guy he is now in terms of parapsychology?
Uh, um, that's a good question, and that's what I struggle with. I was always a closet ufologist in an academic setting, never really talking to people about it because of the stigma attached to that. So I read the books, aligned with Jacques Vallée a lot, and Hynek, a few others. And then I saw Two Orange Orbs in the Night Sky in Sedona in 2012. That started lighting me up. So I wrote the book, The UFO Phenomenon, Should I Believe? That was an objective book, like an intro 101. Let the reader decide. Let me present the facts. It was back in 2014, before disclosures appearing, and a lot more that has happened within the field. So that was more of an academic book for the newbie in UFOs. Then I had, let's put it this way, I had a lucid dream. I felt as if I was suffocating. A terrible sensation. feeling of impending death. But at the same time, I knew my friend who I work with in the lab, collaborate with, dearly respect, had died. I knew it. Don't ask me how it did, but I knew it. Later that morning, you know what I'm going to say. I found out she died. She communicated that to me. That led immediately to writing my next book, Life After Death, an analysis of the evidence. Again, formulating hypotheses, searching through the literature, then you get into the ESP literature, reincarnation, NDE, OBE, quantum mechanics, trying to make sense of it all. So there was a personal connection, and then I put my left brain to it. Here, left, right brain struggling, my subjective experience and my passion to obtain answers. So then I had let's just call it a wonderful, blissful, spiritual experience, which I'm going to save details for my next book, which led me to writing my last book, Unseen Forces, the Integration of Science, Reality, and You, which led, of course, to this documentary. But the passion grows. And while it's wonderful in so many ways and beneficial, to me, it's satisfying in so many intellectual and emotional ways, it's almost equally frustrating because you can't get at the answer. Science, as it stands now, traditionally doesn't really touch it. So, and that's, so I do, that's the downside to this too. You know, because that's who I am. I love playing chess. I started as a kid. I'm asked, what's the first book you read? The 1963 World Almanac. What's the second book you read? The 1964 World Almanac. You know, that kind of personality. And then you hit me with these experiences. You don't find an almanac that has the facts and figures, little interpretations that can be applied to explaining these kinds of experiences. So I struggle internally with it. And but that's why I'm here talking with you. If I didn't have these experiences, I wouldn't get to know such wonderful people, you know, like you and Sarah, among many others in the field. But then, more than anything, more than the science and the theories associated with all this, talking to the experiences, the qualitative, subjective impressions and evidence, it's something I never did in the laboratory, of course, but that's more compelling. When you interact with people who are very well balanced, who you know very well, and they tell you that, gee, I had a near-death experience, and I felt that unconditional love. And the unconditional love I felt, a mother told me, one woman told me this. She says, I had the unconditional love I had when NDE, if I may digress for a second, was like looking, the magnitude of that love. It's like looking in the eyes of your first newborn for the first time, magnified 10 million times, and that doesn't touch it. What do I do with that? What do I do? You know, and then a good friend of mine, Reverend Michael J. Carter, I believe you know him, a wonderful individual. If you haven't had him as a guest, you really should. He tells me a great touch to, what's that, Mike? A great touch. You know, what do I do with that? You see, that's the struggle. I believe him. You know, but where's the science that supports it? So, and we know these anecdotal stories. It goes on in varying ways, in so many different forms that it rocks your world, and you can't put it down. Sometimes it gets so overwhelming. I say, I got to take a break. But then you come right back to it. Now I'm in the documentary, and they meet people, many of those, again, who you know, like Diane Hennessy Powell. And she tells you, you know, she knows a 4-year-old who could speak 6 different languages. She knows an autistic savant. I can't tie the shoes, but has these kind of unique skills, like the Rain Man. You know, the 6-year-old autistic savant, she's telling me, who can compute the cube root of a 4-digit number to the, you know, nth degree, and is right. How do you explain that? Yeah, these kinds of stories, and Diane Hennessy Powell, a noted neuropsychiatrist, whose word I trust, and she's written an excellent book, very popular, the ESP Enigma. She talks about these kinds of examples that don't make sense, doesn't make sense to her, but she's going to be in a documentary too. And a list of guests in our interviewers in our documentary thus far are on our website, consciousnessfilm.info. But in order to make it real, we need proper funding and support. But that aside, we will get it eventually to help me make sense of it. But what I want more than anything else, not personally, and I'm not to make money on this, it's to wake people up. Through my experiences, I realized more, not like the back of my hand, like many people do, but I realized it's critical to make people more aware of this and add more to it, possibly in terms of consciousness and what that implies as we talk about the documentary and these kinds of anecdotal evidence that people are reporting that rocks your worlds, and more so for those who experience it.
I totally agree with you on that. One of the things I find that when I do events, particularly when I do events when I'm debating with skeptics, which I love doing, I absolutely love that, because they always come with their assumptions that somehow we're kind of new age wackos and we don't know what we're talking about, and I love that. It's priceless. But it's always interesting afterwards when we sit down and we have a beer and we're talking about the debate and the discussions, and inevitably after one or two beers, the scientists and the very individuals that really are just materialist reductionists will turn around and they will say, you know what you talk about, I don't agree with anything you're talking about at all or anything you believe, but I had this one experience that I've never ever been able to explain. And you then turn around to them, they tell you this tale, and then you turn around and say, well, why don't you talk about that? And they usually use the same term, academic tenure. If I said this, I would lose my job. And this is the problem we have. We have an awful lot of scientists out there who are not in a position to really talk about their experiences until they retire, until they realize, that their career is ended and it doesn't really matter anymore to them. And it's people like you that are helping us push the barriers and moving the barriers. And I think this is why your documentary is so important, because you're saying things that I believe in totally. I write because I want to understand. It's the experiences I've had, like you've had, where you're saying, I know this happened because it happened to me and I know it's true. And modern science cannot explain this unless there's a paradigm shift in some way. And this is where your documentary is important, Bob, because so if we can come back to this, I mean, what stage of production are you at the moment with it?
Dave Beatty, who's my co-producer, works for Dreamtime Entertainment. We're now in a pre-planning process of the documentary. We're obtaining participants, many experts in the field and experiences as well, and trying to integrate the science with the science of the subjective, so to speak, to get a better sense of true reality. Not that we're going to have an answer, but again, to wake people up in the process that this is real, and educate them, and maybe they'll do their own research. But in order to make that happen, as awkward as it sounds, as a co-producer, you're out there seeking funds in order to put it on a PBS, and that's what we'd like to do, an overlap documentary or Netflix, something like that. You're talking a lot of money. So we have a GoFundMe on our website, and it's like this. It's an awkward position. It sounds like you're begging for money. I'm not. I only want money from people and sponsors who resonate strongly with what we're talking about, so that they have a vested interest in helping to accomplish their own personal mission through this process. And that would be wonderful. But eventually, we would love to have an organization to come up with sufficient funds to help support us, and it would only be used for travel expenses and, of course, editing and production costs. And we're not going to make any money on it. That's not the point. And if I did, it would go to the kids. It's a heart. It's a heart. And so we have people like Jeff Long, the founder of the Near-Death Experiencer Research Foundation. If anybody's interested in doing a master's thesis, go to that website and you'll see over 1,000 qualitative responses from people who have NDEs, and it's remarkable information that is so compelling, very similar in nature and unique to the individual, that can't be ignored. Evan Alexander, who he was telling me, for instance, he's in the documentary as well, and he's author of the bestseller Proof of Heaven, leading neurosurgeon who had a near-death experience. And he tells this story, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. He met a woman during his NDE who told him she was his sister who died prior to his birth, and he didn't know that. She also provided him with some additional information about the family. When he recovered, tells the parents were dumbfounded that he was absolutely, that came back with that absolute information that they never shared with him. It's that. So what does he do? He gives us up his practice, and now he's lecturing throughout the world and trying to again help to enhance awareness on the part of humanity and to the reality of it all. Dean Radin, leading scientist, of course, an experimental psych, ESP, a chief researcher at IONS. He's in our documentary. And he, as far as I'm concerned, based on all the research he's done, without question, ESP is real. Psychokinesis is real. It's statistical. It doesn't mean I could read the number on your in your checkbook. I wish I could, but that's not really ESP. It's statistical, and you have to understand some of the statistics involved, which conclusively prove the hundreds of millions to one odds against chance of the results that are obtained in terms of mental intention and its influence in human to human interaction, human to physical system interaction. You know this, Anthony. Yet and I respect him greatly because he's one of the few who, because of the stigma, is still not afraid to go out there and talk about these things, like John Mack did, who had to fight for tenure because he was supportive of the alien abduction experience. That put the lid on academia. Getting back to your point earlier, which I agree with completely, what academicians are going to risk tenure if they say, I'd love to do research in this area, and if anything, we need so much more research from a wide array of individuals, of course, many different disciplines, from anthropology, from physics, you name it. There's contributions must be made across the board in order to make sense of it. So, yeah, people are retiring. Many of them are experiences. You see now, yeah, they don't have that much to risk anymore. Exactly. And with that destigmatization, for a lot of reasons, media, the Hildebrand Amendment, the DOD's position on the UFOs, which they admit is real. I worked closely with a colleague of mine. He knew of my interest in ufology. He thought I was crazy. So I said to him, you ever do any research on it? Read any books on it? No, but I did see Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And this is a scientist, And then I say, I'm doing a documentary on this. He says, oh, okay, you making any money on it? That's his world. Unless he has an experience, and I think he'll find out one day when he leaves this container of ours. But here again, it's okay, like you, it's okay to talk to people who may not necessarily agree, but give me your rationale, and we'll have a very collegial, professional discussion about that, but don't debunk, don't look down on me. And if those that do, and I've run into them, in a way I appreciate it, because now I know to avoid these kind of people. And unfortunately, I think we need to help educate. And you do that in so many ways through your writings and in this podcast, as many others do. And I have the greatest respect for you and the work you do in that regard. And it doesn't end there. It can go on and on with Gary Nolan in our documentary, who's trying to look at the brain and how we have some psychics experiences have enhanced bilateral white matter connectivity in their brain that's uniquely distinct from let's say, the average or non-psychic brain. And we're going to be interviewing him in February. The point is, he is an experiencer, you see, but he has the Nolan lab named after him because of his extraordinary research successes at Stanford University. So he doesn't have that much at risk, because if he's going to lose tenure, Stanford University is going to lose millions and millions of dollars. So he's sitting pretty. But you see, how many Gary Nolans do we have? How many Anthony Peakes do we have? We're starting to get more, and I'm trying to find them. To incorporate in the documentary, and not only them, but again, people who have these experiences, and to show that certain things that in leading edge science that some people have been doing right now correlate with the subjective experience. You talk about, for instance, near-death experience. So what do people say? Oh, there's no time, no space, unconditional love. I can zoom in and out, go anywhere as I want. You know the whole story. Well, what does Newtonian physics do with that? It doesn't explain it. It's not designed to. Quantum mechanics says so. It touches on that, of course. So more people are going that direction. Then you have Tom Campbell in that documentary, well known for his bestseller, My Big Toe, The Theory of Everything. And he'll tell you about the virtual reality or simulation
Up
theory
there
of the
behind me,
universe.
which is up there, somewhere behind me. There it is, the trilogy.
Yeah, exactly. And but mathematically derived, theoretically formulated, but it doesn't prove it.
No.
Many people ascribe to it because we live in a technological world, and he's a computer scientist. And the point is, when you say what is consciousness, is discipline specific. Given his background, his answer to the equation is going to be in that direction. You see, you talk to a philosopher about consciousness, just get a completely different answer, let alone a psychologist, etc. But very discipline specific. When I had surgery a year or so ago, I continually asked the anesthesiologist, "So, what is consciousness?" While I'm in the just to be ready to be put down, he says, "Oh, consciousness? You'll find out soon after I give you propofol through the IV." So, in the medical community, it's a state of wakefulness. Everybody has their own definition, no uniform opinion. It's very fragmented, of course, and to some extent, that is a frustration. I have to get over that, but and I. I'm trying to, but that's the point of the documentary, getting these experts together, and among others, and even in the UAP arena, like Grant Cameron and Kathy Martin, who's led the experience and research team at MUFON, Chris Bledsoe, noted UAP experiencer, connect the dots, shall we say, as best as possible. And we're not going to get the answers, at least in this body's lifetime. Maybe we will, but I don't think so. We need that paradigm shift. It took 66 years before we first flew at Kitty Hawk to when we first stepped foot on the moon. And I think, given our advances in technology, the next 66 years will reveal some obviously significant discoveries in the area of consciousness, and just starting to look at that too, even at Harvard University, trying to objectively measure chakras in the body. And there's a lot of devices out there that people are creating. Some certainly are charlatan or not right, like mediums. A lot of them, of course, are charlatans, although there are a few that are very legitimate, real deals, like Mark Anthony, who's going to be in a documentary. I lost my train of thought, but the point is, we have to try to figure out the sense and the nonsense that's out there, because there's a lot of both, and we often ascribe to things that are consistent with our beliefs and don't when it's not consistent. So we have that internal bias, of course, and the ego gets involved. And if anything that we need more than anything else, maybe, is ego dissolution. A lot of these people that do have these experiences have some degree of that ego dissolution. They become a little bit more humane. They're not the center of the universe anymore. Look at William Shatner. He goes up into space. That was a Peake experience, of course. It was a lot more interesting to him, significant from a transpersonal perspective, than finding Spock's brain in Star Trek episodes. He's not going to be the same again. Edgar Mitchell had the same kind of epiphany. These Peake experiences come in so many different ways. Noted throughout the eons, as Maslow, as you know, mentioned. But what's that all about? People are changed dramatically
But
philosophical
funnily
personal
enough,
viewpoints
Bob,
that change.
one of the previous guests on this program is Dr. Penny Satori, and Penny is one of the most world famous researchers into near death experiences. And her recent book discusses exactly that, the way in which people are changed. And one of the things that, you give me the opportunity to thank Eben Alexander, because I cite his work in one of my previous books, my second to last book, and Eben very kindly not only proofread the section on his experiences, but when I sent it off to him, he not only proofread it, but he actually added information that he hadn't put in his own book in terms of that, which was so kind of him. And it shows the kind of people that are involved in this work. And I'm just before we move on to consciousness, because there's two things I'm really keen to focus in on: is consciousness itself, the idea of the hard problem of consciousness, the David Chalmers argument, and also peak experience. But I'd just like to bring Sarah in here as to because I always like her to come in with her observations as almost a member of the audience as to what, any ideas, thoughts about what you've heard so far, Sarah.
I just really enjoyed a lot of the things that you were talking about there, Bob, and I resonate a lot with your beliefs and ideas about it. And my feelings with regard to this seeking scientific proof is really, I think what's going to happen is that this kind of phenomena can be repeated, and maybe we can't ever find the scientific proof that we want in the materialistic worldview, like you say. But if we can reliably repeat peak experiences somehow, because we work out what the essential mechanisms are, and obviously that's why the psychedelic renaissance is so successful and gathering such momentum, because that is a repeatable peak experience for people. But I'm I'm interested in doing the same with lucid dreaming, really. And I'm very interested in the parallels of NDEs and lucid dreaming. And I think that there's, obviously as a planet, we're all interconnected. And I think there's probably some sort of mycelial memory that connects us all. And this is how information's able to transcend individuals and be part of a collective somehow. So I think that I was talking to someone earlier today about when I have lucid dreams and I have transcendental experiences in lucid dreams, they're not intellectual, they're bliss, or they're like explosive light. And those kinds of things is very hard to quantify. And a neuroscientist could perhaps look at your brain at that moment and say, this is happening in the brain, but that's just the result of the experience. So it's a really hard thing for the way we do science at the moment anyway, to ever be able to prove these things. But if we can reliably repeat them, then their value should be totally recognized. Whether or not we can write down on a piece of paper why it happens or not is less relevant, perhaps.
I agree. And see, you're exactly right. And you see, that's where my left brain gets in the way. I want a repeatable, measurable, the scientific method. And that's a frustration. I now realize now that maybe that's not so important. It's what's real to the individual and the transpersonal experience that results from their unique enigmatic experiences that appear in different forms. You mentioned what is consciousness, and obviously thousands of papers by people far smarter than me throughout the eons have written about it and continue to do so, and we still don't have an answer, which says a lot. But if I ascribe to maybe anything, it's just what you said: information exchange. Everything is consciousness, conscious panpsychism as an extension of Tononi's integrated information theory. It makes a little bit more sense to me. Not that that is the answer, but information exchange from a solid object, which you just hit on your head. Well, that's consciousness. The rock is telling you, don't do it again. It's going to be a painful experience. Low level of consciousness relative to a human, but that's the bottom line. Maybe it's not propofol, it's not free will, which is a part of consciousness, certainly, but there's a body conscious too. And cells share information exchange. The body internally controls itself through information exchange, of course. We see this in our brain, the conscious and unconscious mind. It can be distinguished in many different ways. And beyond that, however, those types of consciousness or information exchange processes, these kinds of incidents, the OBE, lucid dreams, and etc., there's information exchange going on. People reporting downloads, information like our noted inventors, Tesla, Newton, Einstein. It came to me in a dream. It wasn't my idea. Not brilliant individuals, of course, much of that it was their idea, but they admit the formula came to me out of nowhere. Oh, what's that all about? Where did they get that information? Well, this keen insight, yes, but they contend, nah, it wasn't me. The point is, what is going on? Where is it? Then you get into the quantum mechanics issue, and maybe torsion energy and integrates with the brain, and you can go into that direction and get overly scientific. BS baffling brains about it in a sense, but it makes more sense than Newtonian physics. There is an integration of information external to the body, it seems, that the brain can receive and also send. We see this with ESP experiments again. In fact, if you ask me, is ESP real? Like I said earlier, of course it's real, but it's subtle, but it is measurable, repeatable. But you have to really delve into the literature to figure that out. I have no doubt, and it's more valid. The evidence that ESP is real is more valid than the safety and efficacy of many medications that people take daily, in terms of proof that it works. Yeah, but of course, science is not going to accept that because it's inconsistent with current traditional principles. So yeah, information exchange is my best guess in terms of what is consciousness. And then you get to the law of entanglement and double slit experiment. Again, quantum mechanical experiments are showing that the active observations can compel an electron, for instance, to be a wave or a particle. So what's that all about? Conscious information exchange between physical and you, something in you. That's more than just a phenomenological characteristic of the brain, but the point is, how do you take advantage of that? Does it come in a pill form, or do you have to have an NDE to come to that realization? And for many, you do. But can you induce it through DMT? You brought up an extraordinary point, Sarah. Dimethyltryptamine, the psychoactive agent, the main ingredient in ayahuasca, which medicine is firmly acknowledging as a very beneficial effect on many with severe depression, PTSD, etc. But we're only starting research in that area from a medical perspective and seeing wonderful results that modern drugs don't address nearly as effectively. So, but there's more to it than DMT, because it also seems to be consistent with many people's reports when they have NDE and OBEs and even UAP interactions, and as they say, interactions with non-human entities. David Luke, leading researcher in psychedelics, wrote a recent paper where he did a thematic assessment. I forget how many people he used in the study, but he analyzed the existing evidence out there and did his own research, and the results are astonishing. We're close to 100% of the people who take the DMT say they interacted with non-human entities, which range from machine elves to clowns to grays. But in the almost, I think, 90% of the time, they considered these beings to be benevolent in nature, which is interesting. But here again, what's the outcomes? They become much more sensitive to the ecology, much more interested in nature. That was one of the most critical findings of his study. When I had my unique experience, I wanted to hug trees. I literally, I kid you not, I appreciate nature now more than I ever did. I'm more sensitive to the condition of the earth. Maybe one way to do it is send everybody up into space. That's a transpersonal experience. See that blue dot in front of you from above. It does something to them. You can't do it now, but that's one way to do it. Or somehow modify the DMT, proper dose for the proper individual, and maybe you can be induced. Yeah, a transpersonal event that makes people so-called more humane, more compassionate, sympathetic, caring, less egotistical, and that's the key, ego dissolution. You find me a pill that can dissolve our ego, which we're slaves to because of our brain in varying ways. And we're going to see, an improvement in the quality of humanity in so many different ways. And if you ask me, maybe what's one of the worst things in this world, I think it's the ego. And if you could dissolve it externally, or unfortunately, you have to have some of these kinds of triggers in the form of an NDE, which I don't think people want to have right now, or OBEs. It requires those kinds of transpersonal experiences to change them, generally much more for the better, so that their viewpoints are altered on love, life after death, which they believe in now, less materialistic, more spiritual, less interested in organized religion, all along those lines. Everything that we want, you ideally like to ascribe to as a human being, it seems that they come out of these experiences with variations, personality based, of course, but they're better people. They're happier that they had these experiences. What's that all about? What is that? And that's what it's a wonderful thing. But how do you maybe use possibly psychoactive drugs to induce it? Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? Tell me the company that comes up with that drug, and before it goes on the market, so I can put a few bucks into it, right?
That's why I think lucid dreaming could be so good, though, because you can self-direct that and you can create what you want if you're really good at it. And I've had experiences where I've stood on the moon and I've seen the Earth turning on its axis, and I feel like I went to space in that dream, just completely felt like I was really there. And when I was back and I saw the sunrise, I realized that when astronauts see the sunrise in the morning, they don't really experience it the same way as people that have always been earthbound, because they're aware of the fact that the Earth's turning on its axis. And then I read something that an astronaut wrote about that, how they looked at sunrises different. So, I wonder, because I was talking to I don't think, it might have been David. I think I was talking to David Luke recently about whether or not you could use hypnosis to alter a DMT or an LSD type of experience or a psilocybin type of experience and get the kind of scenarios and the kind of scenery that you want to induce.
And that is where, again, medicine needs to go. Scientists need to explore how many people are doing research in that area. You see what I mean? Because it has a woo associated with it. People risk tenure, because of their efforts in that direction. But that's exactly where we should go. I can't tell you how many billions of dollars are wasted in useless research just to keep people employed, to make money, and the results, you don't have to tell me. I'll tell you, it's just a total waste of time.
My favorite one is I asked a neuroscientist once what research he was doing at the moment, and he said he was doing a study to see whether rats felt regret.
Yeah, that's gonna contribute a lot to society, right? Exactly, yeah. Right. I say that sarcastically, of course, but and you can go on in that direction. So again, the paradigm shift, as I hate to keep using that term, but that's exactly it, I guess. If everybody's more accepting of these experiences from the scientific perspective, more research can be devoted, that is funded, to do the kinds of research that you are talking about exactly, and that David Luke is doing, that Anthony Peake is involved with, because it's real, it's valid, but unless it's uniformly agreed upon by the scientific community, we're not going to go there anytime soon, although we'll see bits and pieces of advancements by some individuals that will help. And we are moving in the right direction, however. It's a very slow process, these shifts, and we're on the cusp, I think. But we need efforts like on the part of people like you, documentaries that address these issues in an objective fashion, that are not, science fiction based, although there's a lot of truth in some science fiction. You watch The Close Encounters of the Third Kind or movie Contact, The Matrix, a lot of truth there. believed in that. I think a lot of Steven Spielberg, I think, was an experiencer. At least that's what the rumor is. I tend to say, I was a hippie back in the 60s. Long hair, smoking the joint, all that sort of stuff. Seeing John Lennon pour all that white rose in his nose outside where he lived in Central Park.
Wow.
And
You actually saw John Lennon then?
oh yeah. And but that was a wonderful movement. Love, peace, all that stuff. But don't drop in, don't drop out. But unfortunately, many people did as a result. But the concept. Now I think we should have another revolution, especially by the younger generation. Maybe everybody should be, developing signs or wearing T-shirts of mashed potatoes like Richard Dreyfuss used in constructing Devil's Tower in his mashed potatoes in order to, with that passion that facilitated through his UFO experiences, just as a way to say, the public, of course, needs answers, and many more people, and the younger generation. That's what's critical.
Well, Bob,
The younger generation is to be turned on. Huh?
I genuinely believe that our little movement here and the people that are involved in this podcast and the work we're doing now, we are going to be the people that's going to change this. We are working together on this, and the more and more youngsters that are getting involved in this. I was only recently I was talking to somebody about the background to my work, and when I first started, a lot of people were our age. Bob and I, and a lot of people that were involved in that. But there's younger people coming in, people like Sarah and a number of other friends and associates we have, and young academics that are coming in that are shaking off the old rules. We're back to the summer of love in terms of differences. Now, for instance, Bob, one of the things that Sarah, myself, David Luke, and a lot of other people are involved in is every 2 years there's an event called Breaking Convention at the University of Greenwich, which David is one of the main movers in. And that is an incredible event where you get literally thousands of people turning up. There's hundreds of speakers. And you really feel this change in the air. And you sometimes wonder whether this is what is happening now, that with society, the way society is moving is to this. But it's up to us to make it happen. And I've always argued that we've got to stop this silo ideas. I'm a psychopharmacologist. I'm a neurologist, I'm a quantum physicist, I'm a cosmologist, I'm a philosopher. We've got to bring this all together and look like a huge Venn diagram and look in the middle, because I think that's where lies the answers. And I know people turn around and say that the multiple of anecdote is not proof, but so many people are having these experiences, have throughout time. Clearly these experiences are profoundly important. When you were talking before, I was reminded, Jacob Boehme, back in the 16th century, in his famous phrase of having an altered state of consciousness, looking at a pewter dish. And he said, my mind changed looking at a pewter dish. So people have had these experiences all the time, which then moves in perfectly to your interest in peak experiences and the Maslowian concept of the peak experience. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by peak experiences and how they fit into your overall worldview?
Peak experiences, I guess we're talking about a mystical experience, a transpersonal event that comes in many varied ways, from near-death out-of-body experiences, even prayer, meditation. It seems to be facilitated by a number of triggers, but when it does happen to somebody, it's a transpersonal experience, and their philosophical, personal viewpoints, again, on matters of great importance in their life are changed. Yet one example is a study done, and I can't remember who did it, administered psilocybin, small dose of psilocybin to about 100 people, 50 of those who were atheists. Okay. About 60% of those who were atheists, after taking the psilocybin, then believed in a supreme being. Now, if an external agent like a drug like that is going to change one's viewpoints on something that's so pronounced as that, Uh, well, what does that mean? But they're better off for it, they feel. It's not a negative thing. That's significant. And you see many different kinds of types of evidence just like that, where you can induce a peak experience, possibly externally. It comes in so many different ways. The overview effect that Edgar Mitchell had, that was a peak experience that led him to develop the Institute of IONS, research center on consciousness studies. It changed me and changed me in terms of writing. Maybe through my writings, yeah, I helped wake some people up. Maybe through our discussion today, if we could change one person's mind who's listening to our talk in terms of say, you know, something, that was an interesting discussion these dudes had. Maybe I'm going to read a book about it. Maybe that begins the process. Once you become aware, it makes you awake. You know, a little redundancy there, but once you become more awake, you become more aware. And that starts the evolutionary process in that transpersonal experience, magical, mystical experience that rocks one's world, that could be initially results in a spiritual emergency without question, and be a facilitator of tremendous anxiety. You know, what happened to me? What does it mean? Am I going crazy? What do I do with it? And among other questions. Many, what more people have NDEs. The divorce rate is higher in those who have NDEs. Yeah, they're changed by those kinds of experiences. I'm not saying that's good or bad. Maybe it is good. Now they realize that they're so different than their partner that they could be much happier. I don't know. The point is, these peak experiences have profound consequences in terms of relationships and viewpoints. But overall, we don't have enough sufficient, qualitative research done in those who have peak experiences. They do tend to believe strongly that they're more humane. They're better off for it. And, initially it could be horrific in some ways, but over time, once integrated appropriately, especially if they speak to people who have similar types of experiences and obtain proper counseling from experiencers, not from the left brain person with the white coat in the ER, that it's integrated, and they can even facilitate the process of that peak experience to where it becomes more integrated, more a part of their daily function. And they can better control their ego as a result, become more tree huggers, become much more sensitive to the ecological, state of our planet. And I think Earth is conscious. Earth itself is conscious, certainly. Mother Earth, and I like to meditate to the Schumann resonance. Why is the resonance of our planet? Measure its electromagnetic frequency, 7 hertz. Well, what's the frequency of alpha state in the brain? Right, the Helmholtz resonance, 7 hertz is the same as the alpha state. Coincidence? I don't think so. Obviously, we're part of the world, and it goes beyond that. It goes well beyond that. But we see these parallels in our physical world with our subjective experience, and now with physical laws is just coming around to validating it. But you hear the science in me. You see, I can't get rid of that. You see, and that's the problem. But I'm learning from those I speak with that it's more than just the academics. It's more of the integrating that peak experience to improve yourself and those around you. And we're seeing that, certainly seeing that. And your research and Sarah, work by David Luke and many others, although too few in number, is lighting the fuse, is helping to make that paradigm a more realistic one that is sorely needed to better integrate these kinds of experiences and that are more accepted by your friends, family members, and everybody else to help you. Because those who have these experiences, like like you mentioned earlier, don't want to talk about it. Well, that doesn't do them any good. That kind of defeats the purpose, impedes that evolutionary spiritual process that they have inherently from that peak experience, and that's a problem. There's difficult times throughout history. Obviously, life is a struggle, and you'll wonder about why does everybody have tragedies in one way or another, and that alone doesn't make sense. Why is life hard? That alone, who made the most sense to me out of all of this? Just about you talk to shamans, you talk to some leaders of Native American tribes, talking about the UAP and other kinds of things we call paranormal. And there was an interview done with a few of these individuals. They make more sense to me just about than anybody else because it's part of their culture. They interact with the phenomena. They understand it. It's built into their, I don't know, their sociological conceptual framework. They integrate it, and they're happy. They seem to be better off for it, but they don't have the internet, and they don't have the latest iPhone and all that, nor do they need it. But because they are more content and happier. They're not searching for that buck. They're not searching for material things to make one happier. They're happy the way they are, living off the land, interacting with this, what we call the phenomena. It's part of them, and they're better off for it. Yet we look down on them. I think science looks down on them, and I think we should be incorporating their belief systems and understanding them better, let alone people who have these kinds of peak experiences. We're at the cusp, and we're all trying to do just that. We have to make the buck to survive, obviously, but at the same time, let's try to evolve spiritually and figure out ways that we can help humanity do just that as well.
Do you know what? There are some times when I do this show and I think how important it is that we are doing this. And the past hour has shown to me that what an important piece of work this is going to be, in that listening to you and listening to your wisdom as well. It's not just your science, it's your wisdom that speaks profoundly to me, and I'm sure I'm not speaking out of turn saying probably Sarah as well. And what we're doing here is, I'm always delighted to have guests like yourself, and I am just so pleased and honoured that great thinkers like yourself are willing and wanting to be involved in this, because we know we've got now the recording and it's there forever, and people on my YouTube sites as well can actually watch this show, can then be interested in saying, wow, when are we going to get Bob back again on Incon, where we can have a bigger discussion. Because it means, I feel at the moment what we're developing is this huge jigsaw puzzle. I know I use this analogy all the time. Maybe not a jigsaw puzzle, maybe a mosaic, I don't know. But it's the idea that every single guest just adds their little bit to the picture. And suddenly the picture becomes clearer, it becomes in more focus. And the more we discuss with our guests and everything, the more it really makes me so motivated to really make this happen. We really need to. Very much, we'll come back to you, Bob, in a second, just in terms of just how people can contact you and everything else as well. But as always, Sarah, have you got any final comments you'd like to make about this?
I just think the whole hour has gone really, really quickly, because we've just got an hour session this time, haven't we? And I've missed doing Consciousness Hour. I realise how enriching I find it, doing it every single week. Like, it's just something that I get really engaged with once a week, and it really does inspire me and makes me think. And like you say, for me personally, I think you're absolutely right. It does seem like whatever themes we've been exploring, the next guest suddenly opens up the answer to the question that was perhaps not answered in the last session. It's really amazing. And I do think there's an element there of following flow and intuition, that you just get the right people always at the right time. And like you say, I definitely feel like I've learned so much from all the various different guests we've had, and it is like every single guest is perfect one week after the other.
And each guest has something very important to contribute, but ultimately, it's people like both of you who bring it to the attention of the public, and that is the key. You are really doing it. You're getting the pieces to the puzzle. You're connecting the dots by doing what you do, so that others, millions worldwide, can get a better understanding of just what we're talking about. And then maybe we could light some up in the process and let them figure it out. We're still figuring it out. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob. I mean, we're hopefully going to change the world. We keep saying that, but genuinely in a nice, controlled, sensible, logical, rational way. But I genuinely believe that we are part of something very important here. Right, Bob, I'm so saddened that, we've run out of time so quickly. It always with the show, isn't it, Sarah and Howard? It's always the problem. When we do the 2-hour shows, they seem to flash by. Sure, if you were doing 3-hour shows, it would flash by. But Bob, can you tell us a little bit about where people can contact you, how they can assist you, how they can, your websites, everything else as well?
My website is bobdavisspeaks.com, bobdavisspeaks.com. And our, again, website for the documentary is consciousnessfilm.info. And if you resonate with what we're talking about and the documentary, feel free, please, to help support us. We do have a GoFundMe page right above the trailer of our documentary. That's if you scroll down, you'll see it. And the trailer, beautiful trailer that Dave Beatty was responsible for developing. He's a producer at Dreamtime Entertainment, he brought it together, and the quality. He's an Emmy Award winner, so that's why I'm confident with sufficient funding, this will be an excellent production and of PBS quality, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. So
Well,
thank you.
I have to say, the quality I've seen of it is phenomenal. It really is good. Right, thank you for our guest Bob Davis over there in probably considerably warmer Florida than over here where Sarah and I are in Sussex in southern England. Just to let you guys know that the next guest that will be joining us will be Professor Michael Lee Sudduth of the University of California, or the University, I think, of Los Angeles, who will be joining us. We'll be discussing again, carrying forward the whole themes of the near-death experience, and we'll be having a very interesting discussion on the implications of the BICS competition as well, which is going to be quite interesting for everybody to tune into as well. We will have Bob back because we've, again, just scratched the surface, as we always do. And as Sarah and I have been saying continually, we're going to try and pull something together and have this mega online jamboree conference if we can do so as well. Also, if anybody's interested, if you're watching this live, I'll be doing on Tuesday 2 live question and answer sessions, which are completely open to the public, and they will be going live on Twitter Space. And the first one will be from 9 o'clock till 11 o'clock. And the second one will start at 3 till 5 o'clock. So if you've got time to join in with that one and you want to ask me questions or anything else, I'm leaving myself open, as a couple of friends have said to me, but I really don't care. That's what I'm trying to do, getting the messages out there. So again, thank you everybody for listening in. This will be uploaded onto my YouTube channel, where it will be available for viewing for free. And we always find that the numbers really massively increase over there, as well as the reputation gets round of what exactly we've been talking about. So thanks everybody, and without you this wouldn't work. And as always, thank you to Sarah in the background, adding her bit to this phenomenon we're calling the Anthony Peake Consciousness Hour. Thank you very much, and we will see you again we'll see you again a week on Monday, and we'll see you again with the shows getting back onto a more regular basis as we go into the new year. Thank you very much everybody, and really enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank